Hey everybody, what is going on? I am Maximus Rex and this is Big Baby Reviews. Today is Mark Silvestri Day. It is Monday, so we are looking at the next issue in his Wolverine run from the early 90s. This is Wolverine issue 50, kind of an anniversary issue, cover dated January 1991. It's got some more pages, longer story, and it's got one of those handy dandy early 90s gimmick covers. This is one of the more interesting ones, I would say, just because it does actually relate somehow to the storyline within the comics. So I think that's clever, where a lot of gimmick covers were just kind of done for gimmick's sake, to make them seem more special so more people would buy them, right? That was basically the idea. Marvel and DC kind of abused that all through the early 90s. But this one's kind of fun and clever, meant to represent a file holding some of maybe Wolverine's secrets from his past, right? He's trying to get access to that in this storyline, last two issues, and this one here, the third issue. So, you know, the claw marks symbolically, kind of represent that, him trying to attain those memories. And once we open it up and open up this secret folder, we do attain some of the memories Wolverine has. You know, his attachment to Mariko, his relationship with Sabretooth from way back when, his relationship here with two members of Alpha Flight, just fishing, I guess in the Canadian North, out of costume, his relation to the Weapon X program and the adamantium bonding process, his relation to the antagonist in this issue, Shiva, and the fact that he may or may not at some point have been part of the CIA and the Canadian Secret Service. If that is what it's actually called, CSIS. I think that's what. Yeah, I think that's what it's actually called. I should know that. I'm Canadian. Anyways, great production value I've talked about before. This is my most preferred paper, newsprint, thick. Color sits well on top of it, and the inks aren't absorbed too much. There's not too much bleed. They're pretty crisp, but also not completely like super dark black, but just a little bit faded, which I think is perfect. So yeah, splash page here, Wolverine, great art. Mark Silvestri, again, pencils, inks, Dangerous Dan Green with help from Hilary Barta and Tom Palmer. You'll see some of the art near the end maybe drops off a little bit, or maybe just looks different because the inker was called in at the last minute to do those pages, so maybe a little bit rushed, because they did need some pages here. But this was an anniversary issue. More pages, so deadline crunch probably set in a little bit there. We'll talk about it when we get near the end. And of course, the script is always is by Larry Hama. So on this splash page, great drawing, right? Wolverine kind of either barreling between these two between these two ladies, or parking his motorcycle. I wasn't quite sure, but when we turned the page, we realized that yeah, he's actually barreling right through into the lobby of this small building kind of setting, lobby, right, and up the stairs into the elevator. With this lady here, and then we get kind of a flashback where he's asking Forge about how he would be able to get on top of the helicarrier, and Forge explaining that it does gas up at the top of a building in New York every once in a while. It's not supposed to be known, right? It's, you know, secret refueling zone, but of course Wolverine figures it out, and I guess that's where he's headed, right? So if I'm not mistaken, he's inside this building here, right? Because it's parked over near the ship. That's how he'd be able to get on. I got to give Mark Silvestri credit. He's one of the few artists, I think, who kind of took that Kirby helicarrier design that everyone just always copies and, you know, changed it a little bit, made it his own, and really just followed that same idea that it basically is a battleship, right? That you would see on the water, but in the air. So you know, the most of the design is based on that, other than the, you know, reactors that would help it stay afloat, right? Get to see some cool helicopters and stuff, some you know, G.I. Joe level tech. You know, I would argue that S.H.I.E.L.D. is a lot of inspiration for maybe 80s G.I. Joe. 60s and 70s G.I. Joe was more kind of straight up military, but 80s G.I. Joe would, for lack of a better term, kind of like superheroes, became kind of super military, with, you know, super weapons, lasers, and super vehicles and stuff, and accoutrements and armor. So that's kind of being reflected here again from G.I. Joe back to S.H.I.E.L.D. I feel with Mark Silvestri. But I definitely think S.H.I.E.L.D. inspired that vibe for G.I. Joe. S.H.I.E.L.D. kind of did it first, right? And Nick Fury really is kind of like the first G.I. Joe. Nick Fury back in the day was kind of just a war hero in a military, in military comics, and mostly about World War II, possibly the Korean War in the 50s and stuff. But, you know, Nick Fury kind of became a super military or superhero in the 60s with Jack Kirby, introducing the concept of S.H.I.E.L.D. and then Jim Steranko kind of pushing it forward, right? So I think you're getting the best of all that kind of in Mark Silvestri's representation. I think this is one of the coolest representations I've ever seen of S.H.I.E.L.D., right? and you know, the whole armada and all the characters and stuff. So yeah, these guys know Wolverine's on his way, I guess, and they expect him to be in the elevator, but no, he's actually gotten out and pushed his bike up the stairs, and then he's on side of that building there. So, you know, if you're really following in the image, it's great because you totally understand that, you know, we were here, looking here, there's that building, right? Same angle. Okay, I know where we are, and we're right next to the command part of the battleship, as we should be in relation to that first establishing shot, right? Good bit of storytelling there. If you notice, Wolverine has a cigar in his mouth. I don't think it's meant to be lit, right? He lights it later, you'll see. But I do love seeing Wolverine with a cigar in his mouth. Nick Fury has one as well, right? And these are the good old days for that, because, you know, not that I'm advocating anyone start smoking. If you do enjoy smoking, that's, you know, make an adult choice about smoking is basically what I would encourage, whether, you know, smoking or non. But if ever there are any characters that should be smoking, it's the three that were, you know, more prominently in those old Marvel comics: Nick Fury, Ben Grimm, and Logan Wolverine, because they all can, you know, just heal from it, just, you know, as they are super beings. So it just makes sense, storytelling wise. These would be the characters that do smoke. And I'm not to say that it's a necessary character trait, but it just helps. You know, it adds to the story, whether you're into smoking or not. It's, you know, it's not a value judgment. It's just the fact that that's part of the character. Love this iteration of the Nick Fury costume. This is like my favorite ever. I feel like there's a lot of Steranko in it, but I could be wrong. I know for a while Jim Lee was supposed to do this Nick Fury, I think a Nick Fury Punisher series, and there's a few pages that were drawn by Jim Lee, and I feel like this is Jim Lee's design. So maybe like at some point someone was like, well, we never got to actually publish it, so, you know, Sylvester, do you want to use these designs in the Wolverine run that you're doing with S.H.I.E.L.D., which I think, if that's what happened, is a good idea, because it is, again, my favorite design. It's sleek, and it's got the Steranko kind of bodysuit vibe, but just with those extra, you know, kind of almost Kirby tech, but in a 90s way. Little add-ons to the costume, and also the guns and pouches and things, which are a little bit of a Liefeld touch maybe. I like the collar too around the neck. Just something really cool about it and iconic that I like. Again, I do think like all these shots in here, Sylvester is just a master, and I think this is the best representation of S.H.I.E.L.D. I've ever seen. Just this one character here who I guess is like a pilot or something, but you're not sure. You know, like he really populates that world well with all these different, you know, people working for S.H.I.E.L.D. You know, the different parts of the military unit. So we get a bit of subplot here. I mean, all great establishing shot, really well done. But I won't spend too much time here. Just to let you know that Hydra's involved. Of course, they're kind of the baddies in the background. And here's where Wolverine, I guess, got enough information from Nick Fury to get back to Washington. And he wants to meet up and talk with the professor, not Professor X, this other character who's bald, but also wears glasses. So he's a little bit different. If you've ever looked up Weapon X, if you haven't, do so. It's a good story. Barry Windsor Smith. That's where the professor was introduced as kind of the head of the Weapon X program and responsible for Wolverine getting those claws and the metal around his skeleton, right? So Wolverine, you know, doesn't quite get through the secretary here, and we do realize that these two characters, I forget her name, Hines, that's it. So the professor's right here, we see him, and Hines, these two characters are from Weapon X with Barry Windsor Smith as well. Wolverine recruits his friends in the X-Men, come give him a hand here, right? And they get to the location. Here's where the art kind of starts to shift maybe a little bit. The inkers, I feel, changed. And I do want to mention that I started seeing with these pages, I really noticed kind of a kinship between Mark Silvestri, Greg Capullo, and the Kubert brothers in the way that they draw and present. Like there's, I could, you know, like their styles would work well together, I guess. There's some, I look at this and it reminds me of Batman Predator, which was drawn by Andy and I think inked by Adam. There's just something in the finish and the textures and the inking, right? Where their art is kind of akin to each other. And even there's something in the face here that's kind of Greg Capullo-esque. I don't know exactly how to describe it, but I see it more now as I go through these comics, you know, that Greg Capullo probably has a Mark Silvestri influence in what he's doing. So what is basically happening here is we're seeing all these kind of, they're almost like movie sets, right? Number 9, senior prom, number 122 hotel room, 135 backwoods saloon, right? And these are all locations that Wolverine can kind of remember with his dodgy kind of memories, right? So he's starting to realize, or he's wondering, right, were those actual memories, or were they all kind of just shot on a movie set and implanted in my brain, right? Because the idea around this time was that, you know, Wolverine had false memories that have been implanted there, because he's seeing some locations where he doesn't remember being there, but he sees claw marks that clearly indicate that he was, right? So this is basically what we're getting through, and I like how the storytelling goes, where the panels, you know, a bit wider here, and then they just get smaller and smaller and smaller, and we're starting to see more and more of it, and clearly the frustration is starting to build as well. Always thought this was a kind of cool hard angle to draw from. Very interesting shot. Good hatching. It's cool. And these are more pages where if I look at like these kind of shots here, I'm kind of seeing like some Adam Kubert, Greg Capullo stuff, right? I mean, Sylvester's always been good with the body language, which I think he's doing pretty well here. You know, Cyclops is always stiff and stoic anyways. Down here, definitely Sylvester, but maybe the inks are different on this page as well. Different inker. Makes his art look a little bouncier maybe. Great shot of Cyclops. Oh, and this, I just wanted to point out how ridiculous Konami is putting out an ad for video games. Back then, obviously, we're getting bigger and bigger, so I guess more and more advertising budget. In the middle of the comic, too, pretty much, so that's a pretty high-priced ad. 1, 2, 3, 4... Okay, let's not count that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 pages of ads in a Marvel, pretty prominent Marvel comic back then, so that must have cost a pretty penny for Konami. Silvestri, not skimping on the storytelling, the number of panels, gotta say it all the way through. Very clever with his, you know, occasional use of Mike Mignola-esque, right? I mean, it's barely there anymore, but it's more of a layout philosophy at this point, right? The way he does this stuff here is kind of Mignola-esque, very simple, black and white, and pretty quick to get through, but very evocative. And he's even throwing in some of those little ba-doops, I don't know what you'd call those, from Barry Windsor Smith and Weapon X. The backgrounds, the geometric shapes he was using there. All right, I've talked before about anchor shots on a page. You definitely got a big one here. That's kind of poster material, right? I'm sure I've seen this in marketing material for other stuff for Wolverine. It's the classic shot of Wolverine jumping at you with claws, though. You know, it's a pretty common trope. And finally, I love the blue again. There's this period, it seems, in Marvel where blue is just being used a lot. I mentioned it in the last few reviews of other comics. This is another example of it. I like it, though. I like the blue. Aggressive blue, I call it. And so basically Wolverine finally figures out that he's got the key to this Shiva door, whatever that is, and finally Shiva's revealed. And the basic idea, I'll save you some time with Shiva, is that, you know, once you defeat Shiva, Shiva cannot be defeated again the same way. Kind of a weird Strife Silver Samurai kind of look there. I don't know if there's something there where, like, when you're creating a Wolverine villain, he's got to be cutty and spiky and stuff. I mean, it's pretty common, right? They're always kind of cut and blade related. Even this Shiva cyborg. So there you go. Wolverine defeats him pretty quickly, but now, as you see, a new version of Shiva is rebooted, and this one won't be so easy to be dispatched by Wolverine. So punching him through some of these bars and places from his memories, right? And here's another example, maybe again because of the inking and stuff, kind of, there's some Capullo and Kubert looking stuff. I don't know exactly how to describe it, but I feel like there's again, just a connection between all those artists, those 4 guys. There's commonalities, that's a good word, I guess, between all of them and their art style and their layout and the kind of bouncy nature of their artwork, the movement that's created in the still images that they draw. Good bit of action too. I think he's doing well there, Silvestri. I mean, Silvestri overall just can draw anything and is very efficient in how he does it, right? And how he handles a monthly comic. So we got the Professor, I guess, watching this whole thing, right? Still kind of getting his rocks off, watching Wolverine suffer, just like in Weapon X. But this Hydra agent shows up, and it's actually Silver Fox. And we're going to, I guess, assume she's there to help Wolverine, but we don't know for sure, right? You know how these things go. get some more flashbacks to, you know, Wolverine's past with Sabretooth, the Hand, World War I or II possibly. Couldn't predict, you know, just from the uniforms. I think it's World War II. And some other kind of secret ops missions here. Fighting on the set of apparently his high school senior prom, which is a little weird that Wolverine... Can you even imagine Wolverine, even as a young man, at like a senior prom? Yeah, I don't think he'd be the type to go there. So Wolverine freaking out. We got that representation of those hallucinations, the spikes, right, that we've had the past few issues there. Which as a kid I didn't understand. Now I kind of understand as surrealism and you know, symbolic representation and all these, you know, art terms. Back then I had no idea, so it was just very weird to me. This drawing is very expressive. I've rarely seen, you know, Silvestri go kind of this rough in his artwork and exaggerated in the proportions and stuff. So something's definitely going on either with the inker here, going kind of thick line or whatever. But yeah, just not something I would expect from Silvestri, right? Always draws the women very well, right? This shot, okay, this is the shot of Wolverine at his senior prom. It's kind of like, it kind of reminds me of Back to the Future there. That's kind of what it reminds me of. And here are the pages where I feel like, you know, deadline's kind of setting in and the art's kind of dropping off a little bit. Not that it's horrible, but it's a lot of just big shots with big open hatching, you know, drawn very energetically. So the movement's definitely there. You know, it's dynamic. I definitely like this shot here, but it's not typical Silvestri, right? There's almost like, there's almost like some Kirby exaggeration going on in this one. I really like it. Just this panel here out of context. Very nice. Yeah. And then we get more of a Silvestri Jim Lee kind of vibe here, right? So Shiva is defeated for another time. Good body language here with Jubilee always, actually, throughout this whole issue. I wish I'd mentioned it. I pointed it out here and there real quick, but yeah, just great body language from Jubilee all the way throughout. It seems like one of those characters, if you're drawing fast, it actually might help a little bit in a way, you know, to make her more bouncy and, you know, seem a little more immature and young. And then we get to the end here of this whole storyline. Professor's been killed. So Wolverine's not going to find anything else out of him, I guess, about his past. So we're left with, again, Wolverine and not knowing much about his past. That's typically how these storylines end. Lighten up a stogie there, so I enjoy that. And Silvestri using some of the Liefeld kind of hatching here in the background, maybe to better effect. And just something in the simplicity of how he drew Jean Grey here and the hatching and stuff. Again, his last drawing for this issue, probably done pretty quickly. And there's just something in this panel here that's very 90s X-Men, and maybe that's why it reminds me of, as well as once they left for Image, these guys, Silvestri, Jim Lee, etc., Andy Kubert and Adam Kubert kind of picked up the slack and kind of, you know, continue that style to a certain extent. So I'm getting those vibes in this, you know, once again in this last panel here of a kinship between, you know, Mark Silvestri, Capullo, and the two Kubert brothers. So there you have it. This is funny because back when, remember this, Wolverine's first appearance may have been the first time I ever saw that. You know what I mean? Back then you didn't have the internet, so who knew about this until you saw it for the first time? And most times it would have been in kind of just a weird situation like this that the editor in this case just kind of decided to throw that in there. Guess he didn't have enough letters and, you know, something to fill the page. So there you have it. That was Wolverine number 50. Did you enjoy this issue? Do you have any questions or comments about it? Tell me below. If you are subscribed, thank you so much for your support. I really appreciate it. If you're watching the videos but you are not subscribed yet, please do so. It helps out the channel, helps get us out there to other like-minded people. Just want to wish everyone out there a great day.
Like! Subscribe! Like! Subscribe!
King Comics presents Big Baby, Volume 1, Issues 1 to 13, 204 pages of story and art. King Comics also presents Star Crasher one-shot, 32 pages, cosmic sci-fi surrealist adventure. You can find these fine comics at KINGCOMICS.CA, at MaximusRex13 on Instagram, or on Facebook, MaxRex or Big Baby.